let's get strategic here, Sean. Let's talk through a couple things when it comes to implementation, but then also some different strategies. So for this type of tactic, clients come to us and sometimes they may have a new medical device that they're launching in the marketplace, or sometimes clients come to us and they have, kind of a legacy diagnostic test that they're just trying to re-engage. When clients come to us with these different challenges or strategies, are these both is there different ways that we can run these types of strategies to really help grow, whether it's again new acquisition or a re-engagement campaign? How do you tackle each one of those different, because they are different types of strategies?
They are different types of strategies and different types of messages for the different audiences. So one of the great things about this is we are able to segment and curate even different audiences for different purposes, different messages, right? So I've actually seen this strategy work really well for those that want to kind of start into this, right? And that could be using the list you already have. So that those customers that you're trying to re-engage, right? So maybe they've ordered once or twice, but they should be ordering, hundreds of times, perhaps a month, but that's fallen off, right? So who those providers are, and then we can use that list to re-engage them, right? I've also seen this in a cross-sell opportunity, right? So they already know the brand, they are already ordering a particular test. Maybe it's a diagnostic type test, but you want them to get into an MRD type test, or a genetic test to find different markers and things or reasons for the recurrence. So those types of applications can work really well because they're already familiar with the brand, but you're just letting them know, hey, there's this other test available to you as well. So we can use those lists that come from the customer to target those specific audience groups, if you will. So and those work really well because you generally can see the lift pretty quick. After you're running that campaign, within 3 or 4 months, you should start to see a lift in that order change in that audience. And again, control groups could be really great for this as well. So you can keep a segment of that group out and notice what the lift is in comparison to those that receive the message. So acquisition can be a bigger group, right? Because depending on where you are in your market, but that can be a kind of a bigger group to address. So a way to get in could be, a re-engagement or a cross-sale type situation.
Great. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of what you mentioned. There's no one size fits all, right? We really get strategic, you and the team, obviously. And when we're on calls, we really want to understand, send us the list, right? Or we can generate it, but what's the goal of this list, right? Why have you created this list and what can we do? I know you just remembered a call from yesterday on it. There's a medical device procedure, it was a knee replacement. And specifically they're hey, we want to re-engage these surgeons because ultimately they should be doing 2 to 3 procedures a month. But a lot of these, the list that they had sent over is, hey, these surgeons are only doing 1 procedure per month, right? So very strategic, they want to grow that. They know these are current customers, but it's more of a re-engagement type situation. So yeah, that's great. So let's.
Can I just add one thing to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think the really interesting thing is if you listen to what we're talking about specific lift for certain people on that list, right?
Right.
But yet we're talking about display advertising. So usually in display advertising, we're talking about general brand lift. And historically, the way to measure that is you do a brand survey and you say, have you heard of this brand before? And you have market research do that for you. And that's how you assess whether or not an awareness type campaign is working, which is where display is an awareness base. What we're talking about is actually bringing that lower funnel into almost a conversion level analysis and response, right? So we're not just looking at, brand lift. In the digital world, a lot of times we would look at the SEO keywords and say, okay, how many brand terms are being searched in a given month, right? And you look at for rises in those brand searches because you brought more awareness to the brand name. But again, it's a little bit fluffy, right? Because it's building awareness, but that assessing that real value is difficult. What we're talking about here is literally this provider got this message this many times, and then he ordered, right? That's pretty powerful when you think about like what you can do with this kind of strategy. So I just wanted to highlight that.
No, that's a great highlight. And to your point, it's, back in the day, there was a lot of waste, right?
Yeah.
Because you weren't for sure if you're reaching the right audience at the right time. Nowadays, we're like so much more precise than we ever have before. And it's exciting. So speaking of precision, let's switch gears a little bit here for the next question. Let's talk about conferences, because most of our clients, probably all of our clients, attend conferences. They've got a booth, they've got, exhibits, they do presentations. So how do these NPI, or do these NPI campaigns, like, do they tie into conferences at all, Sean?
Yeah, sure. So yes, they do. So historically, we haven't really been able to marry the two types of data sets. So geofence technology is kind of a separate way of targeting people. And then the way that we target NPI audiences is a separate technology. Mm-hmm. So we have been able to figure out a way to blend that and be able to actually get an NPI level report from the campaign from a geofence campaign. So we can still run a traditional geofence campaign if that's what you want to do. But if you want to get NPI level data, we can do that as well. And we essentially just layer on the NPIs that we're interested in looking at a particular conference, and then we're able to report against that.
Awesome. And then, so that's huge, right? So a lot of times people, if you're not, scanning badges at the conference, sometimes you miss a lot of those people. So for this, Sean, when we're doing the geofence with the NPI level, so it's one of those things where they saw the ad or they clicked on it, then we can match kind of in the back to say, hey, these are the providers, and we're going to get into reporting a little bit later here, but we should have flipped that. Like, reporting is like so important. We should have talked about that first, but we wanted to kind of talk through kind of strategically how we put these things together for campaigns. But so again, they just really have to click on it or see it, and that's how we tie the reporting to the back end, right, Sean?
That's right. Yeah. And ahead of time, we do have to, with the NPI reporting, we do have to have a sense of who we're watching for, like who we would want to target at an NPI level. So usually we do it pretty broad. So if it's a conference that, targets surgeons or a particular type of surgeon, that's usually what we're filtering for, right? Just so that you're seeing that kind of response and interested or interesting for your business response. So if there's a particular group, subgroup, or other that you want to assess for your business, like if you're thinking of breaking into another segment that is also at the audience, it's just important to have that communication with us so that we make sure we include those as part of the targeting as well.
Yeah. And one of the things I love about geofencing for conferences, obviously it's a great way to kind of stand out at the conference. We all know that majority of those impressions are typically served 30 days afterwards, which I think is a good strategy because, as we know, surgeons and providers and physicians, they're all busy at the conferences. They're doing other things. They've got meetings, breakfasts, lunches, all that fun stuff. Going to, presentations, those sorts of things. So if you can influence or educate them, 30 days afterwards is kind of like almost like a retargeting, honestly, I think that's a better play for this type of campaign. So cool. All right.
Yeah,
so conferences.
So I'll add just a little bit to it. So, yeah, absolutely. So where we see the engagement is usually after the conference, right? And it kind of makes sense because during the conference, hopefully they're paying attention to what's going on there, right? And trying not to, look at their phone and hopefully not email too much or, everyone has to probably check in, but, they're trying not to engage on their devices because they're at the conference. So it makes sense that afterward, and we're able to not only follow them on their device that was with them at the conference, but we're able to connect their device to other devices. So it could be served on their desktop at their office once they're back, or even at their home on their iPad as well. So we're able to connect all those things. The other strategy, since we're talking about strategy around conferences that also can be really beneficial, is a pre-conference strategy, right? So if you have a theater coming up or a release or any kind of announcement, or even you're just trying to drive awareness so that you get more booth conversations during the conference, that's really a pre-conference. You've got to kind of prime that. And so again, that NPI targeting is key, where it's, who is the audience that you want to talk to and have that conversation with. Prime the pump, run that, even 30, 60 days ahead of that conference, just to kind of get them salivating and excited, so that when they see your booth and they walk by, they're like, oh yeah, I need to talk to them about, XYZ. And it really can help facilitate the value of the conversations at conferences if you're planning ahead.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Sean, because to your point, it's not just about the conference or 30 days afterwards, right? Most people, it takes, and again, depending on how long your solution's been in the marketplace, or if it's something new, right, it could take 12 months, 6 months for that physician to really understand more about your solution. So a lot of these strategies that we're executing on are long-term, right? This is not a sprint. This is definitely a marathon. Think long-term for these types of tactics and strategies. Speaking of tactics, let's get into some video, right? So can you run video ads when you're doing these NPI level targeting, Sean?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So online video, absolutely. It provides yet another way to get in front of that audience. Video, we know, is powerful. And the way that they're placed, a lot of times it's a forced view. So they have to watch it before they watch the content they're there to watch. So unlike maybe a banner ad that's on like a byline or above or below or in content as they scroll, this is within that video window or that area where the video would play. So this is a forced view. So we see elevated click-through rates. So you're going to see elevated awareness as well. As a result, of course, video, the placement itself, you're still buying at a impression level. So it's a little bit more expensive than display, as you might imagine, because the value is there. But when you evaluate based on a click, so cost per click, if you evaluate it, it actually is more efficient usually than what a banner ad, just because you're getting more clicks per impression.
Cool. Awesome. The other thing, you kind of teed it up earlier in the conversation, specifically around, and again, definitely, as we kind of talk through this, think through an omni-channel approach, right? And you mentioned this earlier about using NPI numbers and then being able to target those providers on LinkedIn. Obviously, this is definitely something you can do. Can you kind of talk through a little bit more about how that works?
Sure. So for LinkedIn, so LinkedIn is a closed network, much like Meta as well. So on LinkedIn, there are some pretty powerful tools, as you know, because it's careers oriented. You can filter and sort your audience based on where they work, how long they've worked there, what kind of skills they have, what kind of position they might be in as far as a title or seniority level. So those are the basic ways within LinkedIn. The other way is you can upload curated audiences that you are either current customers or targets that you're wanting to do. So that's how we're utilizing the LinkedIn technology, is through our data providers with that NPI list. We're able to then use that to upload into LinkedIn for targeting. So that's basically how the technology works. Unfortunately, unlike, and we'll get into the reporting details a little bit later, because it is a closed network. What that means is that I don't get data back on the person level. So we get, how many impressions were delivered by day, how many clicks came through. But unfortunately in LinkedIn and Meta, I'm not able to report to say, hey, Dr. Jonathan Anderson, saw this ad on this day and then clicked on it, like I can in the programmatic display and online video.
Yep, makes sense, totally. And at least when we're doing these types of LinkedIn campaigns, to your point, whatever audiences we're targeting based on the data, that's something that you can upload. So again, we're reducing the waste. We're trying to be as precise as possible. But
That's right.
Yeah, unfortunately, LinkedIn is a closed network. So
yeah, and usually I should mention, just as a strategy, so we usually do two audiences. So we do the first party uploaded audience at the MPI level, but then we also try to we create as close as we can using the LinkedIn tools to reach the audience that we're looking to reach, the same audience. And we can kind of assess what might be performing better than the other, and then we can adjust budget based on that response.
Cool. And then we're going to move on to creative, but before we do, I just wanted to give you a couple minutes here just to see if there's any additional tips for marketers when they're strategizing to figure out how do we kind of roll this out? Like anything else you'd want to add here, Sean?
Yeah, so we talked about several different things, but just reiterating some of those things. Definitely thinking about a control group. So if you're going to assess what you're going to be doing or what the value is of what we're doing here or what you're testing, that's certainly important. You heard us talk a lot about audience curation and building audiences. So definitely thinking through what makes the most sense for who you want to target, but then aligning the messaging. So we haven't talked as much. We're going to get into the creative side. But obviously the creative makes a big difference. In the consumer world, you're going to get a much higher click rate if you're offering something for free, right? When it's usually, a couple $100s, let's say, or whatever. And so in the healthcare marketing field, obviously that's a little bit different. But so that's something to think about, matching your audience with your creative. And we do usually recommend that you have more than one creative running, right? So being able to cycle through multiple creatives. Again, we're going to get into that. And then I think I lost my train of thought. I had one other thing I was going to add, but we'll come back to it later. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I think just to piggyback off some of that too, again, when we're setting these up, it's an omni-channel approach. It doesn't happen overnight. When we're starting these campaigns, it's almost like test, learn, optimize, right? So we're testing the creative, we're testing the audience, but we've got to get that data, right? And that data typically, correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but really, we're not going to really understand metrics for 3 months, right? 90 days before we even do anything. Sometimes it could be longer, right?
Right. So we'll see metrics right away, right? So we'll know that right away. But what we don't always see is it's a decision process. It takes time to influence somebody and then have them take action, right? So that's the time frame. So part of it is how long after you talk to somebody or educate someone on your product do they then decide to give it a try or to order it again, right? What is that life cycle? And for most, it's 3-4 months is usually a typical time frame for that. So just something to kind of think about. And I did get my other train of thought. So the other thing I wanted to bring up. So we've talked about control groups and audiences and how important that is and matching to your message. The other part is we can also collect data for conversion level metrics. So, and particularly conversion on a landing page or on a website. So that's another point of not just reporting and information, but we can also feed that back into the algorithm, the optimization of the campaign itself, right? So I can continue to optimize based on an audience that converts and that takes action. So it's another way to optimize and report, right? So if they're downloading a case study or they're watching a video on the landing page, those are things that we can feed back and report on and also use to optimize the campaign over time. So that was one thing. That the last thing I wanted to mention too is I will say in the strategy, one of the things that really does help us is any kind of transparency. So a true partnership, true collaboration and conversation about, the good and the bad, and understanding, a little bit more perhaps about the competitive landscape or the challenges that exist or the hesitations that might be out there. And the other strategies that you're already employing, right? Because most of us, this is not our first rodeo. This is not our first time to market for the most part, right? So you've probably implemented, tried, continue to try and retool for different tactics and different strategies. So having that conversation with us can be really helpful because we don't want to learn by then understanding after we've already done something. So helping us learn or educating us on things that you've already learned about your audience, about what seems to work or resonate that doesn't, can be really helpful for us as we help with the strategy for these types of campaigns as well.
Yeah. To your point, I think there's really no one size fits all approach, right? You got to think strategic, got to understand the messaging, got to understand your audience. So super valuable. I'm glad we spent some time on that one.